contributed a very significant check to get this unit started, and it had to go in the 2002 budget. Got it approved in third quarter in 2001. Well, we told him we'd write that check on January 1. Well, he didn't get that check till March 1. What he didn't know was one of the top guys in management wasn't sure he should give that check. And it cost me a lot of political time at that time, but we got it. But Dale never knew about that. I didn't want him worried. Yeah. I always call this my disclaimer slide. Tells a little bit about it. Main thing is, I worked 10 years with Dedrickson, Bocatec, AS700, and now about 20 years with Corid, and have all these products. So if you see some of my bias coming out, that's where it's coming from my experience back there. I was talking with Lee Bork last night, and I was commenting my 71st birthday comes up in a couple of weeks. Well, I'm going to be with my whole family over in Greece. And he said, well, you're just a kid. Well, there are guys older than 71. They're still active in the industry, I found out. Huvepharma, as you look around here, I have one question for you. How many have ever heard the name Huvepharma? I think about 2 hands out of 200 people. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of information. If you look at this, because our product manager is the one that kicked in the funds to sponsor this day, so we could be here today. But if you look at feeding cattle at all, Menenson, Thailand, MGA, ractopamine, then you got Corid, Tilmavec, Game Pro. We've outfilled that whole fund here, so we're very fortunate that way. The other thing is technical support. This is the team I'm part of, and we do answer the phone, whether it's after hours or on Saturday or Sunday. If you want to take a shot at that thing, that's all of our team on there. Dr. Roeder's our director. He's out at Canyon, Texas. Dr. Johnson is our PhD ruminant nutritionist out of Happy, Texas. Jeff Hall just recruited him from the Utah University. He's a toxicologist, DBM PhD. Myself, my PhD and DBM are both here from K-State. I'm an avid K-Stater. You notice everything's in K-State purple. Well, I'm the only one in the company that gets to have all the K-State purple. But anyway, Dr. Swafford, Dr. Campbell, he's back here someplace. Raise your hand, Mark. He's out of Stillwater. Oh, there he is, over here. He's out of Stillwater, Oklahoma. So the reason I say that is, I say, who are we on this Huvepharma? And that's the name now. We have several of our salespeople, Ashley and Chris are here, and our product manager Ian. Why don't you all stand up so people can see who we have here in the group on it. If you ask our sales guys, what does this word stand for? See, Huvepharma is a family-owned business out of Bulgaria. And Chris would tell you that means great drugs, is what that's a Bulgarian word for great drugs. Well, that isn't exactly right on it. What it really comes from is HU is human, DE is veterinary, and pharma is pharmaceutical. That was a made-up name when they named the company. One thing that's important about Huvepharma, with all you guys here, we are all a livestock company. In other words, we do not have any companion animal and horse products. What we do is livestock. Here in the U.S., our poultry division is almost as big as our cattle group, but we just have 3 parts: poultry, swine, and cattle. We are a global animal health company, and we do develop both pioneer products as well as generic products. And that's why I showed you the tech service. A typical generic company is trying to produce at the lowest it can. Where we do Pioneer products as well, we supply that whole kind of technical support for all of our products. This just shows you the location of our facilities around the world here. We are a global company. This is a collage of all the locations in the U.S. Our corporate headquarters out of Peachtree City in Georgia. Here's a little bit of things telling about that. Our main blending facility is in St. Louis. That's where almost all of our feed additives is done. Lincoln, Nebraska. That's where we have our R&D facility, as well as we have a vaccine facility that produces both poultry vaccines and our cattle autogenous vaccine business. Laurinburg, when we talk, guess we don't, there it is. Laurinburg, North Carolina is all poultry vaccine. That's where you start seeing those billions of doses numbers on there. Van Buren, Arkansas is water solubles and feed additives, where our Longmont, Colorado facility is all water soluble. So we have quite a line. When you look at that, we have cattle vaccines. We have a number of water soluble products. Clostrix is one of our products. So, as like I say, those around you probably have used quite a number of our products, even though you've never heard of the name Huvepharma. So, with that, we'll get into what the title of my presentation is. I actually, when I started this, especially Tilmavet, the feed additive, macrolide, looking at for BRD, I had about 20 slides of data. All of it was done 20 years ago, and I decided, man, you've had so many good speakers today, we're not going to throw all that data at you. We're just going to talk a little philosophy of whether we can manage coccidiosis and BRD in the feed on receiving these cattle, on these backgrounders on that. And so, just for myself, to get a little better feel of the audience, how many of you is cattle your primary source of income in your operation? Oh man, that's fantastic. I love that. How many of you just run stockers? Well, we got a really diverse group here. And then how many of you run cow-calf stockers, maybe feed cattle? Okay, very good. That's about as even a distribution that I've seen here in several years. So, our title was, Can You Manage BRD and Coccidiosis Effectively with Feed Additives? We're going to start out with coccidiosis. Probably why that's up there, that's been a special interest area of mine for about 40 years now. My wife always warns me when I come to speak, you guys don't want to hear stories about 40 years ago. Since I bought my first heifer in 1958 and I sold my cow herd in 2008, I've probably run cows a few years there. And she says, I'm not supposed to get into that. So let's get into this. Coccidiosis, why did I even bring it up? Right here. All cattle are exposed, all breeds, all geographies, all crop operations. If you have cattle, you have coccidiosis. And it doesn't matter the season, year. Interesting little guy, it's single cell parasite that grows in the cells and the lining intestines. This is just kind of a simple graphic. If the intestines normal, you absorb all your nutrients. If you got toxic damage, you lose a lot of that efficiency. But look at this number. 400 million annually is the estimated loss in cattle operations with coccidiosis. Myself, I think that's probably quite a bit bigger figure. Whoa, come back here. That really took off on me. Look at that second bullet point. 95% is subclinical. In other words, I'm pretty confident I can walk into any operation out here and tell you those cattle got coccidia, but do I see something that tells me that? No. We know it because 100% of all cattle have some level of exposure. So keep that in mind. You know, I ask guys, when was the last time that you saw an outbreak of cocci in your operation, even if you weren't really managing for it, feeding something specific for it, what's the number of years most guys answer? 3 to 4 years since I seen a cocci outbreak. So that gets back to that 95%. Most people, they know it's there, they know it can be part of what's going on, but they really don't worry about it very much most times. We all think of cocci as this classic little Holstein calf with bloody diarrhea. But when we talk about 95%, we do see immunosuppression. We do see lost performance. But to see that, I have to be in a well-controlled study to measure it. It's not something you're going to visually see out there on animals. That's stress. That's when you're going to manage for it most. But give you time to look at that list. So what does that list say up there? Normal, good management that's going to give you a chance to raise those animals more efficiently. You're going to wean them. You're going to process them. You're going to ship them. So you want to focus at those things that we do with stress there. One of the things we forget about is immunosuppressive. Even subclinical will suppress the immune system. I did 2 studies with Dr. Roth, an immunologist at Iowa State University, back in the late 1890s. Some of the guys on my team would say it was that long ago, but back in the 90s. But what he showed was immunosuppression. And why did we run those studies? Well, we were doing good anticoccidial activity, and what did we see in all of our studies where we did a good job managing coccidia? We saw less respiratory disease. And so being a good commercial company, I thought, man, we're doing something besides anticoccidial. So we looked at that, and what we found is we have no direct effect on respiratory disease, but even subclinical is immunosuppressive. So that's another reason why you want to be important. Now I can see the looks on the audience. Why is he throwing me a parasite life cycle up here? Well, one quick thing, I promise we'll take only a couple of minutes on that, is that egg is called an oocyst. And if we're going to get diarrhea, it breaks out of the individual cell. That baby's 1,000x is how much we magnify that so you can see something that big. Well, anyway, it's got to be out of the host about a week. Then when it's taken up, each one of those eggs will have about 8 of those larvae, and they will develop asexually 100,000 times. And then the second generation would do another 15 to 20. So that single egg or oocyst will produce you 15 million larvae. That's all in the first 15 days, all in the small intestine. Those animals look normal to you. That's the only reason I throw these numbers up here. The number of eggs that an average feedlot steer picks up a day. Anybody got a shout out a guess here? You're probably right, you don't. They estimate 25,000 of those eggs you pick up a day. Well, I don't know. I can't even do that number, 25,000 times 15 million. That's the only reason I show that, because a lot of us just don't give enough importance to subclinical line. But if you understand those numbers, then maybe it does make sense that it can be causing you problems. Here's probably the thing that I find confuses more people than anything. These are the 3 definitions that the FDA puts on our drugs. Our drugs are either a control drug, a prevention drug, or a treatment drug, or they do some of both. But control means it increases the performance in the face of coccidia, but it won't stop you from having a clinical outbreak. So if you're wanting to see no blood or no diarrhea in there, you want to have a drug that you're up to high enough that you have a preventative dose. And that Our labels do not do a good job at telling you that. So prevention, if you're getting a full dose, you shouldn't see diarrhea or diarrhea blood. And of course, treatment is self-explanatory there. Only cord is the only one that has a treatment label there, and you can go and water or feed on it. It's a 5 days consecutive, it's double the preventative dose. So I'm not going to spend any time on treatment. We do have the 2 water-soluble forms that the main ones used there. Just remember, opportunistic times of stress is where your focus is for coccidia. So when we look at that, we have 5 good products you can use. And don't get lost in this old thing, hey, I'm advertising Cord today, or I'm advertising Monovet, or we got Lanford's Rumensin, or we have Zoetis' Decox. They're all good products. Learn what the dosage is and learn how to use them correctly rather than getting lost in who's better or who's best, because they're all good products. Cord, how it works, it's thiamine antagonist. Coccidia dies thiamine deficiency. Decox is mitochondria. Think of that as just lung of an individual cocci cell. The ionophores allow ions to come across. Water follows those ions into the cell, they explode. So they're all good. Here's one of the things we as commercial companies have really confused a lot of cattlemen over the years. Is it better to be coccidiostatic, inhibit growth? Is it better to be coccidiocidal and kill it? Bottom line is, to you as a producer in your cattle, quite frankly, it doesn't mean anything. Because once you have any one of these drugs, whether it's Cord or it's Decox or Bovatec or Rumensin or Monovet, after they've been in that animal a few days, they're all cidal and they're all killing the coccidia at some rate. So here's what's important to you to look at that dose. What did I tell you the FDA's most confusing thing is? It's prevention, control, or treatment on these drugs. So if you look at Cord, it has prevention and treatment, so it's going to do control. Decox is a preventative drug, so certainly it's going to control. Bovatec is the one in the group that's a little different. At the dosage they set back in the 80s there, they only set a maximum 1 milligram per kilogram. So they only have a control label. And the reason is, in their licensing challenge studies, they had cattle show some diarrhea with blood. If we could legally go up to 3 milligram, we'd have both a prevention and control. And that's the important thing is understand, that product can make you a lot of money, but if you're not wanting to see any bloody diarrhea, it's probably not your one to use on it, even though it can make you a lot of money. Monovet and Rumensin, look at the bottom label, because that's the actual label. Read that to yourself a minute. Does that tell you which dose is preventative and which dose is control? No. The FDA has allowed us to have those ranges on our Monovet and Rumensin. And when you look at that, it doesn't tell you. Well, coccidiosis prevention is dose dependent. There's one good study out there that was published years ago, and they did 0.4 milligram per kilogram. That gave them good control and good financial return, but you saw bloody diarrhea. At 0.8 milligram per kilogram, the blood went away and you had some soft stools, so you're still seeing a little diarrhea. At 1.2 milligram per kilogram, which is 54 milligrams per 100 pounds, or 270 milligrams per 500-pound calf. So if you're using Rumensin or Monovet to prevent it, you've got to be up to a higher dose. A lot of the receiving levels we use are more like 100 maybe up to 200. Very seldom are they up high enough to be into this level. So that's the important thing when you take home, whichever one of these drugs you're going to use, learn the dose and how it works and decide what you want to be. Is your return, is your low enough thing, a control is all you want, or do you want preventative and use it correctly rather than get caught in that on the label issue? So with that, any questions on Coccidio real quick? If not, we're going to go into Tilnovet and BRD. Okay, we're going to move right into it. And Tilnovet, do we have anybody in here that has used that product at all? Do we have anybody in here that used Pomatil? Okay, we got one hand raised out of the whole bunch. And so when we talk about Tilnovet, we're talking about the macrolide antibiotic Tilmycosin. And it is bioequivalent to Pomatil. What happened when Pomatil was approved? It was the first drug that required what? VFD. And I will admit to you, I hate to admit this as a practicing veterinarian, I hated that VFD. And I, quite frankly, never hardly used any of the drugs because I didn't like messing with that VFD. What happened in 2017? We got VFD for everything, it seems like. Anyway, all of our antibiotics, we have to have a VFD. So we use that every day. In fact, we even got good digital programs where all we have to do is plug in the name and it'll spit it out for you. We can email it to you. But that is most of the reason feed grade Tilmycosin on there. You see it says it's a macrolide. Why is that important to you in BRD? Macrolides are one of our best drugs for taking care of BRD in cattle. Some of the drugs, you know, what's the injectable form of Tilnovet? Tilmycosin. What's that drug called? Micotil. Excellent drug there. What's probably the #1 macrolide that you see used in the market? Just come out with a bunch of generics. Dedrickson. And then you also have Zacran and Zupreval. Those are probably some of our best things we have for BRD, and they're all in this class. This product is 12.5 milligrams per day for 14 days. One of the things about the dosage is that you have to have a diagnosis of BRD going in the herd. So we have the purists that feel like until I've diagnosed X number of calves, I'm not going to start it. You have the other guys that are bringing in fairly high-risk calves that they know coming off the truck. They probably got 10% of them they need to treat, and they will start it immediately. So you see the usage depending on which herd and what your local veterinarian or your consulting veterinarian is working with is when you start the product as far as running it. And you do have a withdrawal time of 28 days here. It's also approved for use in swine. It's not approved for use in horses and that. I recommend you keep out of it. The other unusual thing about the label, and that goes back to the time when FDA was trying to get their arms around VFD and how to control it. You have to be used in the first 45 days of the production period. Well, that gets to be a gray area on it, but that's what the reviewer thought, rather than any data that showed that. So the whole thing is veterinary feed directive. You do have to have a veterinary feed directive on this product to be able to go to use it. The data I was going to show you, when I started putting it together, I decided, nope, I have time, and you guys have seen so much good information today. You don't need another 20 charts up there. Most of it was back 20 years ago on that. We had a couple little studies that we're going to tell you a little bit about their data in the last 6 months here. But one of the things I mentioned is this macrolide. Oops, am I not getting that? Must be run out of juice. The macrolide, that class of antibiotic with the 4 ones I told you, look at what it does in the lungs. That's why that class of drug is such a good drug for taking care of your bacteria that you see in pneumonia, because you get a 40x concentration in the lungs over what you can measure in the serum in the blood. So you get a high level broad spectrum antibiotic in the lung. That's what makes your Dedrickson, your Zupreval, Zactran, Micatil, Tilmavet, all of them an excellent product for respiratory. Here, this one here, what we compared was top dress to mixing it in the ration completely. And don't worry about what the AUC is. All that is a calculation how much drug over time is present where you need it to be. And at the bottom of the day, if you want to top dress it, you're using a type C, maybe a 5.68 gram product. You can top dress it and get as effective result as you can going forward in the ration. Myself, any feed additive, I always prefer it's in the ration. I feel like I have a better chance to get uniform consumption if it's in the whole ration versus top dress. But you can top dress this product with the lower levels there. The 2 studies I'm going to take a minute to talk about here. I don't have a bunch of data to show you, just tell you about it. This was a typical Southeast Stocker unit here, and it was in Tennessee. And then I got some Arkansas cattle that were shifted to feedlot in Texas, just 2 ones we just fished up in the last few months. Typical randomized situation. We monitored for respiratory infection there, and they got Tilmavet for 14 days. What makes that 14 days on this label a good label? What's important about that? It's how many days do we have therapeutic levels in that lungs that's above what we call minimum inhibitory concentration. That's the concentration that we need to get up to so we will kill the 3 main bacteria that's on the label. And by a 14-day trial, after 12 hours, we're already reaching that level. And you're able to keep it up for 14 days. So let's look at the injectables we got. Micatil, if you use a higher dose, about how many days are you above that level that's killed? About 4, if you use a higher label on that dose. Dedrickson and Zupreval are very close. They keep you above that level about 6 days. I'd have to look back exactly on what the day is on Zupreval. So still, another very good. Zactran, out of the 4 drugs, probably keeps the longest. It's almost 10 days. But right here, you can do it in 14 days. And you can do that in the feed. So you aren't handling those calves, and you're keeping therapeutic levels up there 14 days. And like I say, it's a shame that there was veterinarians like me in practice that didn't want to mess with that BFD when it come out. Because we missed a lot of good years of using Pomatil and Tilmavet because we didn't want to mess with that paperwork there. Let's see here. I got ahead of myself one. Excuse me, guys. That's just talking what we evaluated in those calves. Oh, those calves were also all PI tested on. Here is the results out of that Tennessee study. We had an almost $9 advantage, and the metaphylactic group, of course, was Dedrickson and that, and about $1.26, a hundredweight improvement there financially on it. What's missing on this chart in calculating the cost? How much does it cost you to run an animal through the chute? Not the drugs you're using, your time, stress, shrinkage, injury loss. What's it cost you to run an animal through a chute? We got a bunch of them not very brave. Well, there's a big stocker operator in Tennessee, which between buying and selling stockers, as well as running about 100,000 head himself a year, he estimates every stalker he runs through the chute for any reason costs him $8.34 a head. His calculations, how he comes to that, part of that calculation may be that long old cigar he's chewing on. But the bottom line is, he goes through, he says, hey, I don't keep enough personnel on hand. When I process cattle, I got to hire day help. And he says, I look at what my chute equipment's worth, what my day help's worth, what the shrinkage is worth, and he had numbers on all of that. And he come up with that number every time we have to. So if we got respiratory already at 10% in that herd, how much does it save you per head basis without the drug, without the response? Just not for handling them. And I think it's a thing we've all overlooked. I don't know about you guys, because looking at this group being here, I'm guessing you guys were much better at using technology in your cattle herds. I was pretty slow on that for a lot of years. And this is a technology that we don't want to overlook. You know, you want to take time and get your consulting veterinarian there and talk to him about your operation and how you feed and can you make that work in there. This was the last little study. I don't have all the data on it yet, but they were 600-pound cutting bulls that we brought up out of Arkansas to feedlot in the Panhandle, and we just looked at the 21-day there, but we had 50% reduction in poles and a 0.64 pounds per day. Pretty significant difference. What I need is longer-term data to know if that falls through and that's the kind of got. But bottom line, even our new studies we have, even though I don't have a lot of data to show you, it's all very positive. It all fits with all that older data that we had available there when the products were first launched. You have a chance to not handle those animals, to keep a macrolide therapeutic level in those calves for 14 days without touching them. That's one of the things when the macrolides come along, Dedrickson, I just love that product when it comes along, and that Grams retrieval fit right in there with it, it's hard not to be pulling those animals in instead of giving you that time to get response. I don't know about you, but I pulled a lot of calves in early, so I learned how to use those. And now with your 14 days, you need to work closely with your veterinarian, and your management style is what works for you. But this gives you a real opportunity to manage respiratory disease for longer periods with a good macrolide. And with that, are there any questions? Well, thank you very much.